Dear colleagues, Ministry of Defense spokesperson Mr. Vilyen Pidgornyy will speak on Russia's military aggression in eastern Ukraine. Mr. Pidgornyy, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you a weekly update on the events of the military conflict and Russian aggression against Ukraine between March 6th and 12th. The situation at the front line did not change significantly over the last week. The enemy actions were marked with disregard of Minsk Accords, namely through constant shellings of Ukrainian positions using all available weapons, continuing combat training of the militants, as well as maintaining heavy weapons at the contact line. Per Ukrainian military intelligence, during the previous week, Russian proxies were actively engaged in the hostilities at Popasna, Svitlodarsk, Avdiivka, Donetsk, and Mariupol. Therefore, they had to perform unit rotations more often than usual. The militants continued strengthening their positions in the Lugansk sector along the front line stretching from Stanitsa Luganska to Zolote, as well as near Debaltseve and near Avdiivka. It is estimated that 7 to 8 artillery batteries are kept on alert in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, and 5 to 6 artillery squadrons in the so-called Luhansk People's Republic. This means that dozens of cannons and mortars remain in close proximity to the contact line, which is directly prohibited by the Minsk agreements. Overall, the number of ceasefire violations ranged between 69 on Wednesday, March 8th, and 122 on Monday, March 6th. As far as Luhansk sector is concerned, the enemy repeatedly changed intensity of combat activity in the sector over the last week. Most cases of enemy ceasefire violations accounted for Popasna and Krymske. The week started with mid-intensity hostilities on March 6th and 7th. The enemy delivered dense mortar fire in the areas mentioned above. In addition, Krymske was repeatedly shelled by the enemy long-range guns. On March 8th, the intensity of mortar attacks drops significantly. On March 9th, the invaders conducted a massive mortar attack at Krymske, having fired 50 mortar bombs in an hour. On March 10th, the situation in the sector became very tense. That day, the enemy troops opened fire against Krymske using the whole range of weapons, including multiple launch rocket systems Grad. The militants used more than 320 bombs and shells of various calibers, including 120 missiles. According to the military intelligence, on March 10th, 7 militants tripped over a booby trap mine while clearing passage through the minefield for the subversive group in Popasna area. As a result of the incident, 4 militants were killed, 3 more received injuries. Daily combat activity of the enemy in the sector ranged from a minimum of 10 ceasefire violations on March 11th to a maximum of 21 on March 6th. Donetsk sector. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the situation in the sector was quite tense. Militants continuously opened mortar fire along the whole front line from Svitlodarsk area to Nevelske. The militants shelled Zaitseve with 122 mm artillery on March 7th and 8th. On March 10th and 11th, the enemy used tanks and infantry fighting vehicles near Avdiivka and its adjacent areas to the south and east. On Sunday, the enemy opened fire with Grad having launched 10 missiles against Ukrainian positions in Avdiivka industrial area. Militants regularly used IFVs in Svitlodarsk area, Zaitseve and Pisky over the previous week. The daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 23 on March 11th and 37 March 6th. Mariupol sector now. Last week, positions of Ukrainian servicemen in the sector were subject to severe enemy fire. On March 6th, militants shelled Vilyen with 122mm artillery. On March 7th, the enemy used howitzers against Talakivka, Shirokine, Vilyen, and Taramchuk. Throughout the week, a large portion of ceasefire violations took place in Pavlopil-Shirokine areas of the front line. But on March 11th, the enemy shifted its combat activity to the northern part of the sector and opened mid-intensity mortar fire against Ukrainian defense positions between Krasnogorivka and Mykolaiivka. That same day, March 11th, Ukrainian armed forces engaged in a gunfight against militants' forces. Around 2 p.m., the enemy subversive group consisting of 4 militants advanced upon the Ukrainian positions in Berezove, west of occupied Dokuchaevsk. Ukrainian servicemen noticed the movement and opened fire. The enemy retreated after an armed clash that lasted about 30 minutes. The daily number of ceasefire violations in the sector ranged between 33 on March 8th and 64 March 6th. Over the week, Ukrainian troops registered 19 episodes of hostile drones conducting aerial reconnaissance in the anti-terrorist operation area. The majority of them were noticed in the Bakhmut Road area at Svetlodarsk and near Avdiivka. Ukraine's military intelligence continues to report the ongoing military assistance of Moscow to its proxies in eastern Ukraine. We're talking about 4 cargo trains hauling 1,100 tons of fuel and military hardware for the militants of the so-called DPR and LPR that arrived through a non-controlled section of the Russian-Ukrainian border last week. As per intelligence reports, the total number of casualties amongst the Russian proxies is 17 killed and 34 wounded. The militants also lost 1 unit of military hardware and a vehicle. Last week, 5 Ukrainian servicemen were killed in action, and 41 servicemen were wounded in action. This includes 3 military servicemen who incurred injuries as a result of booby trap explosions. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of the fallen Ukrainian heroes. 3 civilians and 2 men and women were injured as a result of enemy shellings in Zaitsevo and Avdiivka, Donetsk sector. 51 residential buildings located in close proximity to the contact line in Zaitsevo, Pivnichne, Avdiivka, Krasnogorivka, Mariinka, Berezove, and Mykolaiivka were damaged as a result of militant attacks last week. In Zolote, the militants fired several shells at 1 more non-residential building. In Mayorske, which is to the north of occupied Horlivka, a railway track was damaged for the same reason. In Avdiivka, power lines were damaged twice during last week. Currently, the town is left without electricity. Ukrainian servicemen and engineers cannot conduct repair works due to constant threat of enemy shellings. That will be all for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pidgornyy. Looking forward to seeing you here next Monday.
Thank you.